All right, so we're back for part two of chapter two of book two of our discussion of on Balthasar's Glory of the Lord. We're still in Saint Augustine, who is the second theologian. He does, Saint Irenaeus is the first one, and we talked about a number of things that we talked about, von Balthasar's relationship to Plato, and we kind of wondered at the beginning, how he'd respond to Augustine. But you pointed out that Augustine really didn't read Plato. He mostly,
Right.
he really just read Plotinus and the Neoplatonic thinkers. And as soon as you said that, I started looking through, oh yeah, actually, von Balthasar seems to get that.
Right.
We see him talking about Plotinus and Augustine Plotinus. We don't see him directly, and you can see here that Augustine's quoting the laws. He doesn't do that. And talking about translation, I was thinking about the mistranslate, I think, a Tertullian quote of "I believe because it's absurd," and how the improved translation, and this being one book like the Lord of the Rings, I'm almost yes and no. I was wondering how much could he have actually planned out 7 volumes?
Right.
How much was on the fly? I'm sure he had an idea of how he was going to end it and, prove his theological aesthetics. But I wonder if everything in between was like Lord of the Rings, telling us, okay, well, I'm going to find the ring. I know at the end they're going to dump the ring in the volcano, and I'll figure out the rest in between. It's still one book. But just been thinking about that, and with the translation, we talked about how much easier this one is to read, and I keep on wondering how much is the translation, the different translators. And I'm towards the end, there's this great bit, great yet problematic. This is in page 139, section called Harmony and Analogy. The unique balance between the pathos of rhythmical proportion and the pathos of infinity, which dominates Augustine's aesthetic theology, does not derive simply from the encounter of a burning African soul with the culture and conceptuality of Hellas and Rome. What? I don't know enough Augustine to know, the pathos of rhythmical proportions, but what an amazing sort of thing he does. And it's actually not even the whole sentence. He's got a semicolon there and it goes on longer. But we have, Jerusalem and Rome, though he does Hellas and Rome rather than Jerusalem, and situating Augustine as an African thinker. I like that. I'm going to also acknowledge that a burning African soul with the cultural conceptuality of Hellas and Rome does feel like it's indulging in a bit of inaccurate and unnecessary primitivism. With regards to Africa, that's a little problematic. But at the same time, there's so much to love about kind of how he's situating. He's situating as a philosopher, because Jerusalem is not, Athens and Jerusalem, or Jerusalem and Rome. It is Greece and Rome, Hellas and Rome, which is a philosophical connection rather than a spiritual one.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think that, right, I think his mentioning of Augustine being from the African continent is important, right? It's not something that is dismissed or shied away from, but it's just not, I don't think, talked about in the same way that you would with other people. Since we last talked, of course, Pope Leo released an encyclical called Magnificent Humanity. And part of that reflection was on the kind of diversity of the human person, right? And not done in a kind of, human resources way, just talking about, the real, the shapes and forms that the human person takes, right? So obviously Augustine, of course, was you know, deeply Roman in a lot of ways, right? This is the part of the Roman Empire. But but he was ethnically Berber. All right. So this is very much a North African ethnicity that is in a variety of countries now. Again, I mean it's important to point that out. And and again, I guess, and I would agree. I think I don't know exactly what that means. Burning African soul. I think that this is just as an aside. I'm reading a book on uh, one of the great kings of the Kingdom of Congo. And we forget because we often think of like you know the West or Christendom sort of responding to the African continent. Like there are a variety of great empires and civilizations on the African continent that need to be studied. So I say that in a way, like again, it's important to acknowledge Augustine as a Berber. And again, something that I've only recently learned. I don't think I realized this as a kid. Um, you know, like I agree. We often frame it as like Athens, Rome, Jerusalem, right? So his formulation here of you know, the Hellenic civilization in Rome. I don't think I realized as a kid how Greek the Roman Empire was still, right? Greek widely spoken, right? Um, so it makes sense then that he's framing it this way, Balthasar, right? You have Augustine as a Berber, part of the Roman Empire, deeply educated, right? But he's bringing in Greece and Rome into him, right? As he's sort of entering into the world before he's obviously undergoing his reversion to the faith, right? That was his educational formation, right? That Greco-Roman culture.
Apropos of nothing except that I love him. He's obviously a deeply anti-Christian writer, but Gore Vidal, one of his novels, Julian, about the Emperor Julian, who came, I think he was like the second or third emperor after Constantine. So it's called Julian the Apostate, though there's no reason to think that he was necessarily ever actually Christian. But nonetheless, he didn't know Latin. He spoke Greek.
Right.
And he never actually visited Rome. But he was the emperor of Rome for 2 years before dying in battle against the Persians. I guess this would probably be the Sassanid Persians.
All right.
But at that, with that little digression into Gore Vidal, so, and he does this section of harmony analogy, which was harmony, the bringing back of number makes sense. Still in 138, the doctrine of hierarchical number, the highest level which rests in God and forms the ideal world of logos. Now that is so incredibly Neoplatonic. Right there. That is I wasn't quite sure what to think about that. And the harmony between God and the world exists as a result of the relationship of the original numbers. I'm going to kind of jump on a little bit here. Because even the infinite God is not without measure, but has been fully measured by the Son as his exact image. And that's because I was getting lost. I don't know about Augustine and numbers. I understand, with the Pythagorean influence on Plato and on Neoplatonism having a lot to do with these various levels, the emanations, all that. And having only read the two works that, if you only read two things by Augustine, those are the ones I read, City of God, Confessions, when he wrote another like 20 volumes worth of stuff. But that the infinite God is not without measure, fully measured by the Son. That brings it back to so much of the first book.
Right.
With the instantiation in history of Jesus, of the Son, and of its connection to the form of God. And I don't know, it connected some stuff to me. Like you think of you can have a set, the set of all numbers, which provides a way to define infinity. And so the sun as acting like the sun is the set of the measureless number of God, providing a way for us to latch onto it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember in reading that section, discussing Augustine and numbers. Augustine is very good at presenting an analysis of the significance of certain numbers in scripture. Like he goes really deep into that. So, you know, when I was reading that section, what came to mind was actually, a reminder of really how much in some ways you have to know or should know when you begin to take your faith seriously, right? And this is not to dismiss anybody, right? Everybody has their own backgrounds and stories and such. But I remember my sister is very inquisitive, right? She's not a particularly religious person now, but in CCD, she had asked the teacher, right? She said, the number 40 seems to repeat a lot. What does that mean? And the teacher couldn't answer it. And obviously we know why. This is like some parent who's just volunteering, right? But again, like these, Augustine in that way provides a kind of like education for you, right? And seeing like, okay, there's all this stuff going on. And again, contra people who, again, I mean this in all love, this is not meant to be dismissive or anything, but people who subscribe to a kind of literalist view of scripture, right? Augustine and Origen and others were doing close readings way back then. So it's a reminder of that. But the thing about numbers too, I mean, something that has struck me, this is not a Catholic thing, but I remember watching a conversation between Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, who's a convert to Islam from Orthodoxy, and Robert P. George. And that is Hamza Yusuf, was pointing out the significance of numbers in Islam. And I think he had said something like an irrational number like pi that is unending. It reminds us that the human mind can't fully comprehend the reality of God, because that number, we can't fully comprehend that number. So it helps us to think about theological matters. I was like, that's really interesting. So that's a connection I could easily make there too with that section.
I thought I'd heard of him. The Hamza Yusuf or Yusuf Hamza?
Hamza Yusuf. Before I converted, his name was Mark Hansen, but yeah, so it's Hamza Yusuf. Yeah.
No, because there was a brief Prime Minister of Scotland recently, the part of the Scottish National Party, who was, I believe, Yusuf Hamza.
Right.
And so that's why I thought, like, oh, I know, like, nope, that was someone I learned listening to a Spectator podcast talking about Scotland. And just a reminder that ethnicity is a strange thing. That a man named Hamza Yusuf was the head of the Scottish National Party in Scotland. Just as Augustine, as an African, was also a Roman citizen, and we're all children of God, as I've just gotten all hippy dippy right there. There is towards the very end, we're still in this harmony and analogy section. And he does still get, I appreciate the getting the numbers. It's not my thing. But there is a little bit here. Those between body and soul are created by the system of bodily and mental rhythms, which are connected by physiological ones. There is a close relationship between bodily organs and the organs of sense, between sense and memory, between the soul, which is linked in whatever way to the physical elements, and the soul is pure spirit. It's a little too much, but also it ties together a lot we've gone on here, that we have this sort of ascetic epistemology of experiential sight, the organs of sense, and the body, that the bodily organs, the organs of sense, is being almost not quite the same thing, because obviously our eyes are a bodily organ, but with the way they're connected to this aesthetic epistemology, or this aesthetics, which I view as kind of an epistemology, way of understanding sense and memory, soul link, the physical elements of soul. I mean, it's an interesting way that essentially, he's providing an aesthetic basis or aesthetic justification for hylomorphism. That this connection between the soul and the body being in some way, it's the hylomorphic connection between the soul and the body, not the same, but inextricably linked with his focus on the senses and understanding, and this idea of aesthetics.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think, one thing that I'm wondering, I think kind of overarching question I think I'm having so far of this volume. The previous one, obviously, we spoke about how we were just not sure ultimately where Balthasar was going. But now, we see that we know he mentions in the introduction why he selects these particular figures, right? Versus excluding others, right? But I'm wondering where this is going to lead to, right? We're getting this kind of survey of all these thinkers, and then the next one's obviously lay styles, right? So again, like what's going to be the through line for these particular thinkers to the next volume? Because again, a part of me is now wondering, was this Hans von Balthasar's attempt at like a summa that Aquinas did, right? Or just kind of a compendium of everything
is left out.
Right.
He's not in here, which is a very interesting choice. You can see Augustine as being, he is earlier, so he's more foundational in that sense. If you think of Augustine and Aquinas as being the two, I guess did he feel like he had to include Augustine? Because Augustine does seem to be the trickiest one for him.
Right.
Because of Augustine's Platonism or Neoplatonism and his strained relationship to Platonism and Neoplatonism. And I don't have the good answer because I'm not widely enough read in Augustine, but I wonder how much is he stretching?
Right.
To get Augustine in there. He's finding, because I thought he might have some struggles and challenges. We thought the same thing with the previous one, Irenaeus, because of the anti-Gnosticism.
Right.
Are we getting a really accurate picture of Augustine from here? And the answer is I don't know. And how much the picking and choosing, the way we all do when we write, when we do sort of a persuasive essay based upon other sources. But it's a constant, is sight as important to Augustine as von Balthasar says? From what I have read, it is important, but and I haven't read City of God in a while. Read the Confessions more recently, and certainly experiential moments, though not just sight. You think of him hearing Bishop Ambrose,
right,
as being so important. There's sort of performative sight that when he makes his conversion, he insists upon doing it publicly.
Right.
But that is being seen, not seeing. They're related, but not exactly the same thing. How much is he stretching with these first two thinkers to get them into his particular view of aesthetics?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that is an interesting question. I wonder if that's something we're not going to be able to fully see until we finish this volume, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing something, and I think we have gone clear that I've been using, this is his aesthetics is really almost an epistemology,
right?
Theory of how to know something. And I'm standing by that, and this is becoming more and more clear. And he's using it to that effect. But I wonder how much so. Is it really reflective of these two thinkers, especially in light of the next thinker is Dennis, who is more commonly known by the world as Pseudo Dionysus or
Right.
Dionysus the Areopagite or Pseudo Dionysus the Areopagite, because we know that the writer was or not. We're fairly certain he was, I think, a 5th or 6th century Syrian priest or monk, not in fact the dude who knew Paul.
Right.
But we both read him and enjoyed him, Dennis / Dionysus, and I think we both understood that he was very clearly in Balthasar's wheel well. This is
Oh,
this is a thinker that Balthasar should connect with, and having kind of started ahead a little bit, he definitely does.
yeah.
But before we had these two, which we look at, even before reading, like the anti-Gnostic Saint Irenaeus, and then the Platonist, Neoplatonist Augustine, and kind of working his way through those before getting to the guy you like.
Right.
Yeah, and how much is he using those? And obviously with Irenaeus, I mean, I read very, very little, so I couldn't I couldn't tell you at all whether he's right about him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I know I'm excited to dive in. Um, because I agree. I mean, he seems to be responding uh to Dennis in a way, in a way that's different than others. And then in our program we read him, enjoyed him. But this is just an aside. I mean, I am always amused when after the fact they're trying to figure something out about a particular writer thinker, and they attach like epithets like pseudo. So I can imagine millions or centuries from now, right? There's another poet who kind of writes like you, so it'd be the pseudo Christopherani. Yeah.
And we can talk about when we discuss Dennis Dionysus, but von Balthasar has got a great retort for anybody who pitches the fit about the pseudo.
Right.
Though, did he say pseudo Macarius in volume 1? I think he did.
I think so. Yeah.
So maybe not exactly consistent, but I felt like he had to do Augustine because he is foundational. Irenaeus was maybe because that was a challenge of like, I'm going to tackle him head on and I'm going to show that he's actually on my side,
Right.
that my thought is consistent with him. And to some extent, doing the same with Augustine too. You think that he is, like I thought, that Augustine is not going to be aligned with Balthasar. And he's like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Right.
That my thought is consistent uh, with Augustine. And I don't think either of us have any doubt that I'm just going to say Dennis from now on. Dennis, he spells
Yeah.
it Denys, would be relatively consistent.
Right.
Though, of course, there's Dennis's Neoplatonic too.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Because he talked about the one and everything, which is very Neoplatonic. And yeah.
Though, so far, I will say without going, he's kind of elided that a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I've read, so though I haven't finished the Dennis section, I'm looking forward to it. Any final thoughts on Augustine?
No. I mean, I just was happy he chose Augustine because, as I said, I am biased because he's something of a patron saint to me. But again, I'm just excited to continue moving through this book.
And for those who don't know or don't remember, of course, John was very nearly a monk. So that affection for Augustine comes naturally. So, but yeah, looking forward to Dennis. And yeah, I want to read more Augustine. I want to read The True Religion. I want to read Sud Macarius. I did add him to an online wish list.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's saying I'm going to read it for religion because, again, as somebody, even though I have deep affection for Augustine, I've read only the Confessions, some homilies and commentaries, and parts of the City of God. So I'm really shameful. I need to do better. But yeah.
I know. I say we should do it one of the other books, but I was like, we got 5 more to go. So
Right.
in this series, we haven't finished it. But all right. I'll see you soon to discuss. And we're only going to call him Dennis from now on.
Sounds good. See you soon.
See you soon.